Let's see. Okay. Good evening and welcome to The Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy, broadcasting to you from FEMA Region 5, deep in the bowels of the United Police State of Amnesia. Today is February 2nd, 2016. And yesterday we had the caucuses in Iowa, and it turns out that, as you probably know by now, Bernie Sanders came in just a little bit behind Hillary Clinton, and it was really not enough to say it anything other than a tie. Now there is some video out there and some talk that appears to show that there may be some shenanigans going on in those caucuses that may have thrown that total just a little bit in Hillary's favor. It doesn't mean that really, of course, that this is a landslide for Hillary. It's hardly that. On the Republican side, again, Ted Cruz came out a little bit ahead of Trump. Trump looking rather downhearted, but still game to continue to fight in New Hampshire, where again his numbers look good. Now his numbers look good in Iowa too. Now it's possible that both there may have been shenanigans on both sides of the aisle in Iowa in the caucuses. And as blackboxvoting.org mentioned, there is always the possibility of fraud, voting fraud, if there was at any moment in the process of transferring the votes from the local precincts to the state, the votes totals were out of the eyeballs of observers and in private, so that the party bosses could fix the count to favor their candidate. We saw this happen in New Hampshire 7 years ago when Barack Obama was vying for New Hampshire in the primaries with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton stole New Hampshire from Barack Obama. Now, as we know, Obama eventually took the presidency, but at that moment, Black Box Voting did an excellent job of documenting shenanigans going on, which against the exit polls made Hillary the winner. And this is important because exit polls have been historically extremely accurate, because people have just voted, they're asked who they voted for, and then they have no reason not to give you an accurate response as to who that they voted for. But on this occasion, in New Hampshire, even though the exit polls showed that Obama won, Hillary took New Hampshire. And so I remember hearing commentators go, does this mean that we won't be able to rely on exit polls as being accurate from now on? Probably not. In other words, they would, even though it had never happened before, and it certainly never happened since, they would still rely on exit polls. What does that tell you? That tells you that maybe they knew something was up in that particular primary election in New Hampshire, that it's okay, don't worry, exit polls are still really accurate, this is just an anomaly, and well, Hillary was involved, and so what else could you expect? So how will this shake out? Well, maybe the same thing will happen that happened to Hillary last time when she was able to pull her shenanigans to try to win in the primaries, that she won't win, and it'll be Bernie Sanders. Well, we'll find out. But it's so darn close that it's almost not even a win for Hillary. It's still very much up in the air. And it's extremely likely that Bernie will take New Hampshire. So, after all, he's only over in Vermont, which is right next door to New Hampshire. So he has a lot of support there, including my own son, who well, he doesn't live there, but I have relatives who live up in New Hampshire, and they're for Bernie. They're not for Hillary. So, but I don't want to spend the whole hour talking about the election. Most everybody is probably sick to death of hearing the election. I did want to play a clip, a short clip from YouTube from a whistleblower, a CIA whistleblower. Pretty short, but it's very telling. If you could go ahead and roll that clip, I'll make comments about it.
Then I went to technical services, where I was in charge of finding documents that you don't find in libraries, like where you put explosives on a bridge. Where's the best place to put an explosive on a bridge, and what kind of explosive do you have to get that goes underwater without it, destroying its effectiveness. Also, I had to find, one time they wanted me to find out if there was such a thing as a poison that was undetectable, especially one that seemed to mimic a heart attack, that would kill someone, but it would appear that they had a heart attack. I did find such a thing.
Does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.
The poison was frozen into some sort of dart, and then it was shot at very high speed into the person, so when it reached the person, it would melt inside them, and the only thing would be like one little tiny red dot on their body, which was hard to detect. There wouldn't be a needle left or anything like that in the person.
But also the toxin itself would not appear in the autopsy?
Yes, so that there was no way of perceiving that the target was hit.
I think the first time that I seriously questioned anything that was more than, I just couldn't take it anymore, was when I came across this document. It was eyes only, and it was to my boss, but he only had one hand and a hook in the other hand, so I always opened all of his mail and his packages and so forth. And this one, he wasn't in the office. I opened it and I read it. It said eyes only. I wanted to read it because I wasn't supposed to, probably. And it was a report about a mission where they had blown up a bridge in Asia somewhere, and they had killed a number of women and children who were on their way to market that morning. It was reported as though they were really proud, mission accomplished. That one bothered me a lot. When my boss came in, I gave him his mail and I mentioned this, and I said, "This is wrong. These women hadn't done anything. These children didn't deserve to die. Why did we do that?" And he said, that's the fortunes of war. And I said, "But we're not at war. We're certainly not at war in that country. Why did we do that? I don't understand it." And he said, "Well, you're very young. When you get older, you'll understand those things."
Well, I thought that was interesting. It gives you an idea of the activities the CIA is engaged in, and this is pretty much from the horse's mouth, from an employee, a CIA employee. And so we have to take this into account when we're considering whether or not we're going to support such behavior. And it really is beyond the limitations that are placed upon the CIA as an information gathering organization. It is mission creep to the max. It's beyond anything that Harry Truman, who got the CIA, essentially started the modern CIA, ever envisioned, I hope. And now the CIA is so powerful that its reach extends globally, and it is involved in manipulating, bribing, causing revolutions, destabilizing, bringing about havoc worldwide, and in the Middle East, no exception. Central Asia, no exception. We know that they're involved in drug running as well, and weapons smuggling. We only have to look as far as Mena, Arkansas, back in the 80s, to see evidence, very strong evidence, that the CIA was manufacturing weapons, taking them down to the Contras in Nicaragua, and then flying back in an empty plane to a third location, picking up drugs and flying them back to the United States and disseminating them throughout the American populace. And that would be to pay for the manufacturer, paying the pilots, keeping the airplanes running, and to fund the whole operation. This is not anything unusual. The CIA's involvement in gun running and drug smuggling, and probably a lot of other stuff too, criminal activity, has been going on since the 60s at least. And they justify this because the goals, the ends justify the means. The goals are worthwhile in their opinion, and the stupid American people are out of the loop anyway and don't deserve to know because it's classified, it's for national security, or it's above top secret. The American people are not worthy of knowing what is going on in their name, and so this is their attitude. They have a very paternalistic attitude towards the American people, just the way they patted that woman on the head and just sort of said, "Don't worry, darling, you'll understand when you grow up. You're very young." And that would be a typical attitude. And you know, she did grow up, and she was a middle-aged woman in that clip. Many years had passed. That clip looked like it was. The clips it looked like Barry Goldwater. I mean, Barry Goldwater is from the 60s. He's a phenomenon of the 60s. And that gun that he was handling and sighting through and so on was apparently a CIA type of gun that was used to shoot those ice darts. And, you know, this isn't the only kind of James Bond secret weapon that is used by the CIA. CIA has a museum that only new recruits are allowed to see, and you can go through that museum. I read an article about it and see all kinds of spy weapons, including a little Dragonfly drone with a camera and a microphone that is used. It looks like a Dragonfly, and this was created in the 70s apparently, but my own family had personal encounter with a very similar type of device. My sister was at a rally for, it was a rally against, what was it? Against the drug companies or something, psychology, and sort of, you know, anti-establishment. She noticed, she was sitting in the back, and she noticed this strange insect that was hovering around, and she got a look at it. She has pretty good eyes, and it looked like a dragonfly, but it wasn't a dragonfly. It was more boxy. It looked mechanical. So she followed it around, and it went and hid up inside of a tree. She went up the tree and looked at it, and it's looking down at her. It was floating around or flying around up there. And then she went back to her seat, sat down, and the rally continued. Then it came back down and continued its activities. But she thought how strange and spooky it was that they were being surveilled by this little device that was clearly some kind of a very early drone in the shape of an insect. Now we know that they've gotten much more sophisticated than that from those days, and you can, insects do carry cameras. I'm not trying to get people scared or paranoid, but this is just the world we live in. And we have to understand that this is the way things are done, and you know, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. But I always think that it's better to know what's going on. It's helpful. It is useful in, you know, making decisions about how we're going to conduct our business and live our lives. So you know, we have to consider that times are moving forward. We are living in kind of a science fiction movie world. I just recently, for instance, went to Hawaii, my first visit there to visit an old friend, stayed there for about 10 days, and I discovered that the sky in Hawaii looks much different. The clouds look much different than they do in Ohio. I saw in all that 10 days not one single, well, what is popularly known as chemtrail. None of the white lines across the sky, crisscrossing, tic-tac-toe lines, none of that feathering that you see, like there'll be a line across the sky, and then there'll be a feathering of clouds off that line. They stretch a very good distance across the sky in a kind of a curtain, and it's creating cloud cover, but in a straight line, whoosh, and then over. None of that. Every day, the clouds were completely natural looking, very, just fluffy, little white clouds going by. And so it was really amazing. The sky looked so much more beautiful there than it does here on almost a daily basis. And yeah, there are some days where there are no big streaks across the sky, but many, many days there are. And, I thought, what a wonderful place to live. People there don't seem to have the level of stress that I see in Ohio and other places that I go in the United States. Maybe it's because the place is so isolated, way out there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. People spend a lot of time just watching the sunset or looking at surfers or lying on the beach, taking it easy. People wear very casual clothes, flip-flops, shorts, and it was really remarkable, and it was a very relaxing. Not so much for the beaches, which were great and everything, but just because of the general ambiance. And the population of the island, the Oahu Island, was very strongly Asian, Hawaiian mix, and you got the feeling that maybe there were even possibly more Asians and Hawaiians than Caucasians. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but so it was very diverse, and yet there didn't seem to be the tensions that are played up and hyped up so much in the continental United States. Watching television, the local Hawaiian TV stations, there was a lot of advertising directed toward Asians, whether they be Japanese or Chinese or Filipino or Polynesians, Polynesian mix. And so that was different. And of course, people are just people, but nowhere have I seen that in evidence that people are just people any more, pronounced than in the Hawaiian Islands. Now, I did find out that, yes, there is a strong nationalistic movement among the native Hawaiian people, and which is, my friend said, he understands that, and they are oftentimes fighting against the development of certain areas of Oahu and the other islands in the chain of those Hawaiian islands. They get very political, they stand up, they hold signs, they complain, and he said that this is something that's been going on more and more. And so, of course, they're being affected by the news that they see and the events that are happening on the mainland. And so this emboldens them and encourages them, which is good, which is a good thing. Because a lot of what the Hawaiian people insist on are things that are actually good for the islands, and they have a strong loyalty to the islands. After all, even though Hawaii is a state, it used to be its own country until fairly recently, with a king and a queen, and they were persuaded to step down from the throne by the U.S. government and certain factions and certain interests and certain financial interests in Hawaii that had gradually taken over Hawaii over the last, 100 years. And so they finally just sort of backed off and allowed the Republic of the United States to acquire this independent country and make it a part of the United States of America. Who knows what will happen in the future? Maybe eventually Hawaii will break away from the United States and become its own country again. I don't know how that would work out. A lot of countries that have been annexed or colonized by much larger countries, and they have seen their ethnic population exploited and manipulated and actually exterminated to a large extent. So that has not been good for them. However, when they gain independence, then another group of exploiters who are actually natives come in and they exploit. There was great hope at the end of colonial period. This would be in about the 1950s, the 1960s, well, 40s through 60s, let's say, when the old empires really fell apart. India was no longer a colony of Great Britain. As an example, Great Britain gave up Hong Kong. Other empires gave up their holdings and they became independent countries. Rhodesia became Rhodesia in South Africa, and South Africa itself became no longer colonies. They became their own independent nations, and they have fared well, more or less well, depending on your point of view, I guess. And this is just how things go in the world. And I'm not even saying that necessarily the CIA is doing all bad things. There may be some good outcomes from their activities, their efforts. I guess it just depends on who you mean is going to be the beneficiary of the good outcome. What I'd like to think is that the CIA is working for the benefit of a majority of the American people. Probably the reality is that the CIA is working for a small group of wealthy and powerful people who have the most to gain for the activities of the CIA in destabilizing or reducing sovereignty of a particular country. And this all has to do with looking at the world as a playing ground or a chess game in which various empires or various interest groups are vying for segments of the natural resources. Natural resources are the true wealth of the planet. The currency is only a symbolic wealth. And yes, you could buy things with dollars and yen and rubles and so on. But as we know in the past, eventually this currency will fail. It will be replaced by another currency, and a person who owns currency could see a dramatic drop, the ultimate drop in value in their currency under certain conditions, down all the way to zero. Now, no natural resource will ever lose all of its value. gold, diamonds, rare minerals, even copper, steel, iron, certain minerals, the rare precious stones. All of these have intrinsic value. And I've talked to people who think that no, gold has no intrinsic value. Gold is the classic natural resource that people have used as a repository of real wealth. Coins were circulated up until very recently in gold and silver and copper. Those were the top three. So a gold coin does have intrinsic value. It does have it because of the numismatic value, because you have collectors who are interested in the date and the condition and the country that the gold coin originated from. But you also have an intrinsic value of that gold coin in that if it were melted down, it could be used to make jewelry, it could be used in manufacturing. This is the same way with palladium or platinum. They're pretty rare. And also jewels, diamonds can be used in manufacturing. They're very hard. You have the diamond edge saw. These are industrial diamonds. You can cut things. Diamond is one of the hardest substances on the planet. It'll cut through almost anything. So if you glue tiny pieces of diamond on the edge of a saw, you can saw through cement, through tile, through all kinds of really brittle, hard substances. And so this is a intrinsic value. Now, technically speaking, the only intrinsic value of a dollar, a paper dollar, will be, I suppose, the amount of heat and light that it could generate when it's burned. Other than that, the value of a dollar and any other currency, a paper currency, is only that which it is assigned by the marketplace and essentially what people believe that it's worth. If people think that a dollar is worth a dollar, then it's worth a dollar. If they lose confidence, lose faith in the dollar, in the value of that dollar, then the value of that dollar goes down. One of the major reasons why the CIA exists is to prevent the almighty dollar from being superseded by other upstart currencies. Now, we saw this in Iraq. We saw this in Libya. There have been other countries that the dictator, the strong man of that country, really gets a lot of success in his country, in controlling the people, in bringing about industry, and doing things that are actually good for his country. Believe it or not, some dictators really are very patriotic. And that doesn't mean that they are brutal towards their enemies, towards the opposition. They don't want anybody to be able to be a threat, to bring them down. And now the ultimate goal of a nationalistic, patriotic dictator would be to bring his country to the point where it becomes a competitor in the world market and has a currency that is vying for a level of status that will allow it to compete with other countries. In other words, people will believe in the dinar, let's say. Let's say Saddam Hussein, wanted that dinar. He wanted it backed by gold and silver and to make it stable, to make people believe that there's value here. This, so that the value of the currency goes up. This makes the whole country richer. and he gets status, he gets respect, he gets power over his own people and his neighbors, and he becomes a true player on the world stage. This is the same thing that Gaddafi was doing in Africa. He was vying for top dog status in Africa, and he saw his currency as coming up, 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 and he had worked very hard over a long period of time to educate his people, to bring them up in so many different ways up to a high level of civilization. So it was reaching from third world status all the way up to first world status. And this is where when you do this, when you are an upstart, you draw the attention of the controllers of the planet, of the owners of the planet. And they are holding on to their power. They are looking to expand their power. And when they see a possible competitor, they want to destroy that competitor. And what's the best way to destroy a competitor, to quell the upstart, to knock the legs out from under him and leave him prostrate? That would be to demonize him, to demonize his country, to call them terrorists. I mean, many, many countries have engaged in this kind of asymmetrical warfare to get territory, to, they're having squabbles with their neighbors, like in the 80s, the horrific war between Iran and Iraq, which the CIA was involved in. And so they are saying, uh-oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about Saddam Hussein? He used to be our boy. He was our guy. We helped put him in power. What is he doing? Thinking that he is going to wrest control and sovereignty and become, on the level of us as a regional, not a local strongman, but a regional strongman in the whole Middle East, so that people will bow down to him, maybe literally. And we have to knock him down. And so all his crimes are suddenly, and of course they're going to be committing crimes. That's how they stay in power. They're brutal dictators. And so all of a sudden, America or whoever cares about and publicizes and talks about and propagandizes and even exaggerates the crimes of that dictator. And he becomes an evil dictator. He's not someone we can deal with. He's not our boy. He's not, he's bad, but, he's our bad. He's bad. He's helping us. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This type of attitude. If that goes by the board, then the dictator's days are numbered. Because when the power of the global elite comes crashing down on the local bully, the local guy that is running the show, the strongman, the thug, who's been working for you, then it's only a matter of time. But the population of the United States or Great Britain or France, they want to get them behind the action, because they don't want to be seen as the bad guys themselves, that they invaded or bombed or undermined or destabilized without just cause. And that's why, for instance, with Gaddafi, the propaganda machine was turned up full force against him, and they were saying, the news media was saying, but he's about to kill thousands upon thousands upon thousands of his own people. Now, there's really very little evidence to show that he was about to do that. But yet, it was used by the administration as an excuse. Well, we have to bomb them. We have to get regime change here. We need to destroy him. And they did. They did do that. And Hillary Clinton very famously, infamously said, we came, we saw, he died. And that was in reference to Gaddafi. And some very horrific footage is circulating that shows Gaddafi in his last moments. Very pathetic sight. And no doubt the guy, deserved it. Bad guy, but so many leaders who are highly respected, unlike Gaddafi, really are also guilty of egregious misbehavior on the global stage. This is the world we live in. This is the reality of the world we live in. So this same scenario plays out over and over, and it has for centuries. But I think the part of this story that we need to know, we need to know that what we're doing is nothing new. People have told me, oh, that's nothing new. Well, yes, exactly right. This is nothing new. And for that very reason, we need to understand how this works. How it's a cycle. It's an up and down cycle. Just like the whole world, the whole universe is working in cycles. Circles within circles, cycles within cycles, from the very smallest subatomic particle or wave to the microbial level, to the level of mammals and reptiles, to humans, to the solar system, to the universe, to galaxies. It's all cycles. Things come and go. This is the manifest world that we live in. And does this mean that we should throw up our hands and do nothing and just sit around and drink beer and watch TV and just essentially medicate ourselves so that we don't feel this comedy, this tragedy, this ongoing drama that we live in and we will continue to live in our whole lives? No. We're a part of this big show, and we have a part to play. We have something we can contribute to it, and therefore it is important for us to vote. It is important for us to make our understanding known to others, our wisdom, our knowledge, our awareness. It's important that we get out and talk to people and mingle in society, and try to, if we feel that we know something, if we have an opinion, if we have access to certain information, to certain facts, it's important that we broadcast that. We send out those seeds in all directions, and maybe some of those seeds will actually be planted. They will germinate. They will grow. They themselves will grow other seeds. They will be sent out into the world. And so, in other words, the message will resonate. And we may not notice that our message resonates. Everyone has a message. We may see no return at all, but eventually we will see the ripple effect as those shock waves, the resonance bounces off other people, other groups, and that comes back to us. And so every human being has a contribution to make to the world, to the history of the world, to the history of the human race, to our society, to our neighbors, to our family, and every human being is important and has a purpose. And that's only on one level. I mean, we all have a purpose just to be alive that we may not understand, but because we're alive, that means we have a purpose just because we're alive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive. If we didn't have a purpose, we wouldn't even be here. Because we do live in a conscious universe, and things don't happen for no reason. Even accidental things happen for a reason. Even coincidences happen for a reason. Even random intersections happen for a reason. These laws of physics apply from the very bottom to the very top, and all the layers in between, and all the manifestations, and all the complexity and the beauty of life. And we can appreciate that. We can exist and experience it. We can swim in it like a great endless ocean in which the waves are carrying us forward and back with that tremendous power that those waves have. Even though you don't see the wave necessarily, nevertheless there are currents, there are waves, they're pushing us and pulling us in different directions and having an effect on us, and it is there for a purpose. This is what life is all about. And we can appreciate it, and we can feel grateful for having a life, and we can enjoy it. And this is why I was just reading an article today about, well, for instance, the reliance of so many people on social media to get their human fix, their humanity fix, their intimacy fix, their escapism from their world, their reality, their problems, their challenges. That is just another addiction, at least for very many people apparently. Maybe particularly young people, although I see older people also involved very much in checking their email and their Facebook always, constantly, every few minutes. Even in an audience waiting for the movie to start or waiting for the concert to start, you see these lights all around you where people are staring down at their machine, their iPhone or whatever, and the light is shining up off their faces and they're staring down into it. And what is such an incredible importance? So the article was saying that apparently there's actually a problem that is developing with the frontal lobe being too stimulated and preventing people from making certain connections and getting the understanding and awareness that they need to have in order to function. It's actually stunting people. You might think, well, this is my information tool, and I can find out all the answers here by checking and constantly, having all my questions answered instead of relying on memory or conversing on a face-to-face level with another human being. We're now talking to our machines, and our machines are talking back to us. And this commentator suggested that we keep these devices away from children, all devices away from children, at least until they are 3 years old. And this person recommends that you should keep the devices away from children in their grade school years, and then even in high school, keep the devices away from children, except have it in a room where it is specially designated that they can get online, they can check their email, they can look at Facebook, and this would prevent this kind of problem from developing, this obsessiveness. I mean, my understanding is that sometimes people are actually driving while they're looking at Facebook or checking email and getting into car wrecks or walking in front of traffic or bumping into things and getting hurt or killed because they're just not looking where they're going. Actually, I was trying to dial a number while I was driving. I'm guilty of this too. And dialing a number while I'm driving, looking down, and boom, hit a curb. Didn't cause any damage, I don't think, to my car. It seemed like it was okay, but I hit it about 30 miles an hour, and that's potential for knocking your alignment out on the front end of your car when you hit something that hard. Even a low curb, boom. It's like running into a brick or something, running over a brick on the street. And so that was a wake-up call. Maybe that's one of the reasons I'm actually addressing this issue, because that happened. It sort of makes you realize, what am I doing? You know, I'm so involved with this electronic gadget that I'm actually putting myself in harm's way. Is this the way I want to live my life? No. I mean, the potential for an accident is increased by when your eyes leave the road for more than a second or two, you are potentially giving yourself a serious issue. If someone brakes in front of you and you're close to that person and that person brakes, and your peripheral your eyes don't see those brake lights come on, you could plow right into the back end of those people. And we have to take that kind of thing extremely seriously. So we need to be aware of our surroundings at all times, and we need to really look at our world from as many different angles as we can. Now, I have friends who are very, very strongly Republican, and I have friends who are very, very strongly Democratic. And what they tend to do is they demonize the other side. They will not listen seriously to what the other side has to say. They just dismiss them without even any analysis of what they're saying. And the reality is that both sides have something interesting to say. What I find frustrating is that, for me, the Democrats have something to offer, but they have other things about them that I don't like. The same way with Republicans, they have something to offer, but they also have some positions that I don't like. And they seem to be the opposite. So it's very difficult to make a decision about whether to go Democrat or Republican, because they switch. What the Democrats don't like, the Republicans do. What the Republicans don't like, the Democrats do. And so neither party, for me, provides a nice, easy fit for my views. And I'll give you an example. I'm very much against war. And I think that war is a last resort rather than a first resort, and that really ideally, if we were going to follow the Constitution, we should actually have an official declaration according to the Constitution, just like we had a declaration of war against Germany and Japan in World War II, and we have not had a clear declaration of war according to the Constitution since. And that's why, for instance, the Korean War used to be called the Korean Conflict. I remember very well my parents calling it the Korean Conflict, or they even at some point early in those days called it the Korean Police Action, because it was not technically a war. Now, since then, they simply call it the war, the Korean War. And some people don't understand that war is not just something that should be taken lightly. It's not just something you do. I recently visited a friend of mine in Hawaii, as I mentioned, and he's a staunch conservative, and he's very proud that he is a staunch conservative. And he believes that ISIS should be bombed. They should be killed. We need to go in there and take them out and knock them back so far that they will no longer be a threat. And I told him, I said, but this is asymmetric warfare. You cannot kill your way to victory. This has been shown over and over. In fact, Donald Rumsfeld was just on, I saw him on TV when I was in Hawaii, and this old crotchety old guy with this permanent kind of skeleton face with this wicked smile, this grin, this smirk that's on his face all the time. And he very smugly says, yeah, asymmetric warfare, you can't win with your Army, your Navy, your Air Force, your Marine Corps, nothing. You cannot win. Well, I'm thinking, well, that was not your attitude when you were Secretary of Defense. And now you say that we cannot win. So why did you want to engage in an invasion of Afghanistan, which perpetrated an asymmetrical war against American forces that's still going on at this very same time? And it's still happening in Iraq as well, and is really going on in several other countries. And a lot of other countries the American forces have been involved in. And now you say with a smirk on your face, well, they can't win. You could never win. And I was thinking about that afterwards, and I was thinking, the only explanation is that he actually likes that. He likes that we can't win, and so he's going to rub our faces in it, because he and his buddies, the warmongers, the manufacturers of weaponry, high-tech weaponry and low-tech weaponry, got exactly what they wanted out of those 8 Bush years in which Donald Rumsfeld was Secretary of Defense. And he's quite happy about the situation, which we are not going to be getting out of anytime soon. Yes, it's a fact. Obama is not going to be pulling U.S. forces out of Afghanistan. According to what I was hearing on the news today, they will be there for 6, 7, 8 years in the future. Because why? Why? Because the Taliban now runs 3/4 of Afghanistan. But wait, I thought we defeated Afghanistan very easily in 2001. They just vanished. Well, if you remember back, the commentators who had their heads screwed on straight back in 2001 said that the reason why we won is because the Taliban just simply hid. They hid their arms. They just dissolved. They just gave up their positions of power, and they even informed the American forces and the interviewers that they were just going to wait, and the Americans would eventually give up, just like all the other invaders of Afghanistan eventually gave up and went home, and they would come back when they gave up and went home. And now American forces are down to 10,000. Now, I don't know if this is an accurate number, because that may be just combat Marine Corps, Air Force, naval forces. Now, they don't talk about the contractors in Afghanistan, the contractors who are not officially members of the armed forces. They're private mercenary contractors that are nevertheless paid for by the U.S. Government. That means you and me. Now, so that is an unknown number. But nevertheless, in order to actually secure Afghanistan, just like Iraq or any other number, the military knows exactly how many men would be required in order to secure a country as big as Afghanistan. And their number is something like 500,000 or something like that. In other words, you have a man literally on every street corner in the whole country, and you have an occupation force that is in every town, every village, the countryside, air patrols. You know, you want security, that's what you need. And even then, you're going to be having guys popped off just like this, right and left, by these asymmetrical guerrilla, we don't use the word guerrilla, forces anymore, because I guess that doesn't seem cool anymore. You know, it's like, that's too scary, you know. We're fighting guerrilla fighters? Those guys are badasses. We can't win against them. But no, if you say asymmetrical, it's like, we're going to fight them, we're going to win, and Ted Cruz is saying, we're going, and all the Republicans and the Democrats too, we're going to destroy ISIS. Oh yeah? You can't win against an asymmetrical force. Even the military will tell you that. So, but do they even really want to win? No. They don't even really want to win. This is the long war, folks. It's going to be going on for another 50 years. Didn't you know that? So that's all there is for today. Have a great weekend and see you next week.